Hello everyone. So about 2 weeks ago, I made a little response video to a YouTuber called Sepi. He's mainly a racing game focused channel, and he released his playlist series on anti-gravity racers, which I chose to respond to a couple of his points in. And oh boy, was he not the happiest about it. So in this video, I'm going to respond to his response about my response. It's responseception, if you will. Although do keep in mind, this is probably my last response to this guy, as I don't want my channel to become drama-focused. As goofy as that might sound, as at the end of the day, we are just two dudes talking about video games. As always, don't send this guy any harassment or anything like that. Also, if I sound weird or different from the last video, it's because I have a new mic set up. But yeah, without further ado, let's just get into his response.
Some videos about anti-gravity racing games, someone responded to 3 of them, and here's my response to that response.
Anti-gravity racers are some of my favorite racing games of all time.
You've literally only played 2 of them!
Okay, so the criticism here is that he thinks the wider tracks in GX overall make the turning and avoiding enemies way easier in the game.
Correct.
Which I would kind of slightly disagree with because there are over 30 racers on each track.
So are there in F-Zero X.
And even once you become somewhat decent at dodging CPUs in the game.
Just like X.
Okay, so the main problem with my first video that I will admit is that I was far too vague with my criticisms, and didn't give enough context as to what I actually disagreed with in Sepi's video. For that, I apologize. I'll be far more thorough this time around. So in Sepi's original video, F-Zero GX isn't hard, the main thesis of that video is that F-Zero GX is a bit overrated with its difficulty, and that the main difficulty in this game isn't anything outside of what you would see in something like F-Zero X. The main vibe I got from Sepi's video was that F-Zero GX overall had far more shallower mechanics than X, and that the difficulty was far more decreased from that game, creating a far lesser racing game experience in his opinion. Now, to not make the same mistake I made in my last video, here's my clearly stated refute to that video. My claim is that F-Zero GX is in fact a difficult racing game, and has far more engaging mechanical depth and good racing design than what Sepi gives it credit for. My defense of his second video, F-Zero's Deceptive Clones, the retort I was trying to make about that video was that XF Extreme Formula wasn't just an early access slot game that was nostalgia baiting, but a full-fledged complete racing game that has more than enough content to justify its price, and is still growing. The only reason it's in early access is purely due to a technicality, as the developer wants to pack this game so chock full of content. Even if XF were to release in the state it is today, I would argue that it's more than proved itself as a fully fledged game experience. And to the final video of Sepi's I responded in that video, why anti-gravity racing games are dead, my main claim against that video was to prove that anti-gravity racers weren't all dead just due to the genre having a bad slew of games, but to more complex, multifaceted reasons. So those were the 3 refutes I was trying to get across, just so we're all clear.
To avoid them, the player must dodge and weave through them, while also dodging enemy cars as they can bump you into these.
Like X!
Features many sections with these slippery patches, which also narrow the track even further, and even a shortcut that is in this top path, that if taken correctly is actually faster than the normal path, but has a higher risk as you
Yes,
go
yes,
off,
very
off the
unique.
path, or just straight up die, where they actively try to spin attack you and knock you off course.
I don't know what he's trying to get at. If you're saying the game makes you dodge opponents because there's so many of them, well guess what? F-Zero X has the same 30 racers, on narrower tracks, with weaker strafing. That game emphasized avoiding opponents way better than GX did. Commenters noticed this too, and in response, he contradicts himself by saying that X was actually really cramped and unfair, the CPUs would ping-pong you.
No, I actually don't contradict myself here, because in my video, I barely mention F-Zero X at all.
Like the overall vehicle control is definitely more forgiving than F-Zero X, but that doesn't tell the entire story. Now imagine how broken and even more chaotic a green shell would be on tracks like these.
Again, I was way too vague with my criticism, but my main point during this section was to prove that F-Zero GX was still a hard racing game, despite the wider track design. The reason I used Mute City and Cosmic Terminal as an example is because, despite their much wider widths, the obstacles and hazards on the track, when paired with the 30+ racers, made the racing overall harder. Here's some more examples. In Firefield's Undulation, these humps in the road make you fly off the track if you're going too fast. In Aeropolis' Drag and Slope, you have this section where the track is literally covered by this slippery stuff, functionally making the track way less wider than what it actually seems. In Sand Ocean's Lateral Shift, you have whatever the hell this section is. Like, holy, do you see this? So yes, while F-Zero X also had 30 racers on the track and aggressive CPU behavior, the overall track design in GX is far less forgiving than X. Does F-Zero X have difficult track design? Yes, of course, but in my opinion, it's nowhere near as hard as an F-Zero GX. I mean, they literally make you fight to stay on the track. The only reason this section seems like a contradiction in the first place is because I actually never gave an opinion on X in the first place. But to that point, yes, I also think F-Zero X is a hard racing game. Despite me never saying otherwise, I guess I might as well clear that up for y'all. F-Zero X and GX are both quite difficult racing games by most people's standards. They demand a lot from the player, in both precision and reaction time.
I guess his overall point about this game being easier to control than X is true, but the game scales in difficulty the higher you try to place in these races.
I mean, rubber banding, X had that too, though not as strong.
If you try to go for first place on the maximum difficulty, then these tracks are extremely difficult, even with all the advanced tech you can know.
No, you can comfortably beat F-Zero GX on the hardest difficulty without any advanced tech. You can find plenty of glitchless playthroughs online. And I'm assuming you mean the races become harder, because changing the difficulty doesn't change the tracks, unless you count respawning.
Okay, so one, people being good at this game on the internet doesn't prove this game's overall difficulty. There are plenty of people that are good at games. I mean, people beat Dark Souls without taking any damage. Second, I mean, yeah, the difficulty only affects the other racers' AI, but are you seriously telling me that a beginner at GX could easily beat all of these tracks, even without the AI? Seriously? I mean, even I die on these tracks sometimes. Also, wouldn't the worst rubber banding make GX more difficult, as artificial as that may be? Though GX is known for having a bad rubber banding problem, it's way more fair than what people give it credit for. For one, it doesn't have that annoying CPU that always gets first place regardless of what the other CPUs are driving like. It gives all the CPUs a more equal opportunity to pass you using rubber banding, thus making for a more fair competition, but I'm starting to ramble.
While I do agree that the wider tracks does make the car handling much more smoother and easier to approach, the racetracks at GX get far, far less forgiving the further into the game you get.
So like X.
Okay, please show me a single track in F-Zero X that requires you to drive sideways on a wall-less track with narrow bindings on each side, with CPUs trying to attack you. Again, tracks in F-Zero X are difficult, but GX just has it way harder.
So I feel like this complaint is a little bit of a personal preference. Yes, the quick turn exploit allows you to take every turn in the game almost effortlessly.
Didn't know people considered quick turn an exploit when you can pull it off by accident, but whatever.
But I wouldn't say the main challenge with F-Zero GX is getting to a top speed and maintaining it.
Maintaining top speed has been a crucial aspect since the very first F-Zero, but whatever.
Okay, so this is a point I did fumble a little in the video. What I should have said is that yes, while maintaining your top speed is the main point of these games, the underlying skill that is needed in order to achieve this goal is to have better control of your vehicle. It is to know the track better. It is to dodge obstacles, know at what point in the track you can take many shortcuts, using the exploits in the game to get an edge on your opponent. These are all skills that you need in order to maintain your top speed, or your lead. Yes, F-Zero has always been about maintaining your top speed in order to win, but that's just kind of a nothing statement because what racing game isn't? I mean, if you think about it, literally every racing game is about maintaining your top speed. If you're always at your top speed, you'll always be able to keep the lead and you won't have to deal with the other racers behind you. It's the most ideal position in any race. My main point with F-Zero was that maintaining your speed isn't enough, that you have to actively look for opportunities to maintain that speed by, using the exploits and shortcuts and stuff. The same goes for kart racers, only in that genre you use items instead. My main issue with your point wasn't that you were wrong, but more so that it was kind of a nothing statement. Saying F-Zero is only about maintaining your top speed is like saying Mario is only about jumping on enemies and reaching the flag. True, but doesn't say much about the game's depth, although I will admit I could have argued this point much better in my video.
I don't get this one. Are you saying unintended shortcuts are the highlights? This mindset will make more sense once we discover this guy's main genre, which, big surprise, isn't racing.
Again, it's different from F-Zero X, but I wouldn't necessarily call it easier, as you still have to learn these mechanics, and a beginner player is not going to come anywhere close to being good with this, even after they learn the tech.
Again, you don't need to learn any exploits to beat any F-Zero game. That's a common misconception coming from GX's overhyped difficulty. Most of these tech aren't intended and are way too overpowered and game-breaking. Even if you can't optimize them, they'll still give you huge advantage. Also, F-Zero X had a lot of bullshit as well, so this isn't a GX exclusive thing.
I never said it was. I know F-Zero X has a lot of exploits too. My main point was that new players won't know about any of this because not everyone plays video games with the wiki page open, especially when GX first came out and everyone was new to its gameplay.
Also, the comparison to Mario Kart is pretty weird, as I know Sepi isn't a fan of kart racing games, as they dumb down the mechanics of racing a lot. But the reason these tracks are so much wider in Mario Kart and other kart racing games is because players are constantly spamming items that can traverse the entire area. Now imagine how broken and even more chaotic a green shell would be on tracks like these.
Well, they can't make the audio excuse for F-Zero, but he's somewhat getting it. Easier driving and cleaner races are the primary reasons for widening the tracks. Unfortunately, I have to mention that this isn't me making things up. It's a logical conclusion shared by AI, humans, and Reddit users alike. This isn't a kart racer or AGR thing, it's a racing game thing. Why do you think Horizon and the crew get me known so much for roads being so incredibly wide? X tracks were already too wide and speed focused. You never even brake in that game. So GX had no business widening them even further and increasing the grip to power ratio in addition.
Okay, first of all, you make fun of me for using Reddit as a source in this same video, but the main thing is, yeah, widening the tracks is overall a good thing in racing games, especially if your main focus is for the racers to have fun and you want to have 30 plus racers on a track. I don't want to sound elitist or anything, but most gamers memeing about the wider roads in video games like Horizon or The Crew is so funny to me, because you know that they will complain about the exact opposite way more if the tracks were as narrow as this. Video games exaggerate reality all the time, and the tracks in GX are the way they are in order to create for a far more creative and dynamic track design. Obviously, racetracks in real life aren't this wide, but the game designers are taking a creative liberty in order to make the game more interesting and fun. I don't mind the wider tracks in these games because the track obstacles and design are far more important to me. They create a fast-paced spectacle, the likes of which are rarely seen in any racing game, and for that, I applaud them. Also, as you said yourself, F-Zero X also has a lot of wide track designs.
To wrap things up, your tracks wide because 30 racers argument doesn't make much sense. We're talking about a game that puts you against that many opponents in the first place, gives you 2 combat moves, a kill count, and even a bit of health for taking others out. This isn't a game that wants you to race clean or by yourself, or else they would have gone with a typical 8 racer grid. It's easier on the hardware too. So it's safe to assume that making the driving easier was the main reason for widening the tracks, and the races became cleaner as a side effect. The other option would have been to make the ships grippier or slower. Well, they're incredibly grippy and responsive already, and slowing them down was obviously not an option in a game known for being fast.
I don't want to repeat myself as I've already stated before, but the widening of GX's track is done for more spectacle reasons. Sure, a byproduct of that is that racing is a lot more cleaner and easier to do, but I feel like the developers intended for that to be the case. They wanted the main difficulty of the game to come from the insane and extremely intense track design. They were upping the ante, if you will. Also, I get that you don't like the more grippy and responsive controls from most AG racers, because to you they don't feel like you're controlling a realistic vehicle. But in my opinion, and this is definitely a personal preference, I think AG racers feel worse when they try to go for more realistic car physics and controls. I mean, these games are supposed to be about the future of racing. I'd rather than go crazy with the unrealistic physics and controls, but they have all these sci-fi aesthetics, all this cool and hype music, and essentially just go like, yeah, you're basically driving a Ford 150. Again, F-Zero GX is going for spectacle, but it does so without sacrificing the danger and intensity of the racing.
It's no secret that the faster you're going, the bigger of an impact your steering inputs will have. I wonder which game emphasizes and was made on a console that had a controller fit for the job.
Air drifting is a very niche mechanic that only works for like time attack trials and on only like 6 tracks in the game.
What is snaking? The thing I like to call Arab drifting. If you use max acceleration settings in GX, alternating between left and right strafing will actually increase your speed. That's why snaking gameplay looks like this. But wait a minute, did you say niche mechanic? Where did you pull that from? This isn't important, but it's by far the most egregious error in the entire video. GX's snaking is so busted, it makes most other exploits look like Mario Kart. Don't believe me? Look at the leaderboards. Snaking runs have their own category. The time difference to non-snaking runs isn't even comparable. It's like a different game. And it doesn't matter if it's a race, you'll be out in front in no time.
Okay, so Sepi is completely right here, and this is by far the biggest mistake I made in my original video. I had assumed that snaking wasn't that useful for legitimate racing in GX, and was mainly only reserved for things like time attack trials. The reason I believe this is because I often didn't see it being used for the few competitive GX races that did occur. Little did I know, the reason for this is because most snaking is outright banned in most competitions due to its overpoweredness. Oops! So yeah, I'll hand that to him. I just completely fumbled this point entirely due to a lack of research. Again, it depends on what he's referencing here. If he's talking about the main controls, then I would say F-Zero X is a lot more difficult to control, which I would definitely agree with. But if we're talking about the actual mission difficulty, then yeah, F-Zero GX definitely takes the cake.
Even GX's missions aren't that hard. I already covered mission 2, but now let's cover mission 7, one of the most, if not the most infamous mission in GX. I have another video where I beat this level on the hardest difficulty while giving the AI a 5-second head start without using any tech bullshit and with some other small handicaps. This is not a display of driving skills. The driving is above average at best, and no matter how skilled you are, every vehicle has its limit. It is instead a display of patience, because while you spend most of the time fighting for positions in this mission, the AI is scripted to slow down on the final straight, allowing you to take the win at the last seconds. I literally beat this mission on my first attempt on hard and very hard difficulty. Normal had 2 resets because I was learning the track, and this was all live too. It's not just me, watch other people beating this mission and you see the exact same pattern at the end.
Okay, so Sepi is also right here. For most of the missions in GX, the AI just flat out sandbags towards the end of each race, allowing you to easily beat them, even on the hardest difficulty. But as I said before, a new player, if they're not using Wikipedia while playing the game, won't know that. And this is an exploit, not a normal way of playing the mission. Approaching these missions like a normal player, you'll try to keep your lead using general racing principles and not exploits, which is where the difficulty comes from.
I seriously don't know why people say this, but yes, in most games, you can cheese difficult sections pretty easily if you just know what you're doing. Hell, in Hollow Knight Silksong, a game I recently just beat, there's a notorious boss fight, spoilers by the way, at the end of this area known as Biowater, this hideous abomination called Grohl the Great. He's an extremely hard to beat boss fight, unless you just camp the bottom right side of the arena, in which he completely can't touch you. Knowing this exploit completely trivializes his fight, and he becomes one of the easiest boss fights in the game. Now imagine if you're a new player playing Silksong, and you didn't know about this exploit. Grohl the Great is easily one of the toughest bosses in the game, and you would not be remiss for saying it was difficult. Or rather you would because of the toxic fanbase, but that's a different point. The same goes for F-Zero GX. The game is hard if you don't know all of the secret exploits and broken strategies, but unless you're playing the game with Wikipedia open in the background, most players aren't going to know about that stuff, and they certainly didn't upon release. Hell, I didn't even know about staking until I looked it up online, when I played GX since I was a kid. You can call it badly designed and cheese all you want, but it is still the truth. That was my overall point with this section. F-Zero GX is a hard game for people who play games casually or even semi-casually. Even if you're familiar with racing games, most players will struggle with GX, and that's the satisfaction that comes from playing it. You go from struggling on these intense white tracks to becoming a master at them over time. I'm sure, Sepi, since you're experienced at most racing games and already knew about all of the tech beforehand, it's easy for you to beat them, but that's not how I judge the difficulty of a video game. If I was going by the standards of me personally, then something like Celeste would be the easiest game in the world, but it's obviously not.
He hasn't done his due diligence for this part, like most of the video, but he does have a point at the end. I linked a wiki for the sales estimate, and someone edited it to replace his 700k estimate with a 1.5 mil figure. So, how many copies did F-Zero GX sell? In an interview, the producer of the game said GX sold 1.5 million copies worldwide. So that must be it, right? It's been 15 years after all. Maybe he pulled that out of his ass or simply misremembered it? Well, that's exactly what people debated over online, because prior to this interview, there was no indication of GX selling even 1 million copies. He shows a Reddit post, seriously, that says GX must have sold over 1 million because it was on Player's Choice, but actually, the threshold for the Player's Choice Award was lowered to 450k in 2003 for GameCube, with another source indicating that it might have even been 250k. The most reliable figure is from a publication that, even to this day, tracks weekly physical sales for Japan only, and that one's at just over 100k. All this with worldwide estimates at mid to high six figures, far from the 1.5 mil mark. Which one you want to believe is up to you, but don't claim to have done research when you've ever even heard of the estimations.
I'm not going to spend too much time on this section, as I mostly got the sales figures from general consensus. While yes, it is sad that his original link got deleted, I don't think that the number of 700k copies sold that he put in his final video is fully accurate either. I do want to point out though that I don't think GX literally sold 1.5 million copies exactly, but more so that Sepi was downplaying its sales. I actually think it's closer to 1 million mark as most people proposed, but there's a lot of contradictory evidence on both sides. What I do find hilarious, however, is how earlier in this video and later on, you'll see him chastise me for criticizing his use of AI, saying stuff like AI is better than using a Reddit post and whatnot. Well, if you actually go on Google or ChatGPT or any of these other chatbots and say, how many copies did F-Zero GX sell? They'll flat out tell you it was 1.5 million. Not to say that these AI chatbots have any authority on what's the truth and all, but I just find it so ironic. I guess AI chatbots aren't as accurate as you think, Sepi. That, or they're only accurate when they agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm the one who's confidently wrong and rage baiting for engagement apparently. What engagement are you guys talking about? My AGR videos performed so bad that even a lazy, poorly researched response to them got more views than the originals.
Okay, so that actually is kind of insane. I'm not gonna lie, I did not expect my video to pop off this much. I expected maybe 500 or even 1,000 views, max.
Is never going to carry an entire game.
Oh? It's not, you say? Then tell me, what is this game's whole deal all about?
I really don't know. You tell me. Looks like some fast-paced platformer to me. Actually, we know this guy probably isn't an HR fan, since he can't get basic facts right. He does seem to like XF though, and XF's developer is mainly known for fast platformers.
Okay, I should have made this point more clear in the video, but this was a joke. Granted, it's not a really good one or even funny. I was just trying to showcase that for a lot of video games, the sense of speed is the point. Making the player feel like an unstoppable force of nature is literally the core feeling behind many game franchises, with racing games being the main genre for it. Not to say that XF is only about the sense of speed, but it is a main part of the game's appeal.
But they handle more like characters. They have no weight, momentum, or inertia. They fully brake in a near instant and never lose traction outside of water sections. They lack principles that define vehicle physics.
Ah yes, the defensive AI art, because I can't hire an artist to make a better one. Ever heard of Google Images? Also, what the heck is this image even representing? The 5 components of vehicle physics in racing games? This is arguably even more confusing than if you just used a simple black chart and listed off the 5 core principles like this. Also, I've already talked about the realistic vehicle physics earlier, but this is a video game. You can make the car drive however you want. Also, before you say, it's not about realism, then what is it about? XF's cars do have acceleration. They can turn and steer like a vehicle. They don't have a jump feature, which is actually what defines most platformers, by the way. They do have braking and power steering, though. Why don't you consider them vehicles, or that they have only two-dimensional control? Is it because they don't feel weighty enough? They turn too smoothly and too fast? Sure, you can argue they don't have realistic vehicle physics, but they do still have physics all the time. They're just exaggerated to make the gameplay more fun and fast. When people criticize you for only liking realistic car games, they're saying that because, in your own words, you don't consider these games as real racing games for what are seemingly arbitrary reasons.
I mentioned this for Aero GPX and Star Racer in the same video, but of course XF fans couldn't help but to comment before finishing it. And those two games are far more interesting to cover, because XF only has one barely notable trick, and of course it's a type of drift boosting. XF fanboys came at me hard for playing an older build of the game, and sometimes I misrepresented it because the new content wasn't there.
Although I will say it's weird that he only dedicates about 30 seconds to this game where it has so much more to offer, especially since he's most likely playing the update that has the amazing engrossing story mode added to it.
Have you really watched my AGR videos? You really want me to talk about story in a racing game?
Okay, I know you don't think much about story in racing games, but the reason I mentioned it is because XF Story is a lot more than just specially curated races. It has full-on 3D platforming stages in it with its own combat system, a combat system that features upgrades, combos to unlock, and other upgrades that help you during the race, unique tracks that aren't even in the regular arcade mode, and full-on animated cutscenes with their own custom music and actually interesting characters and writing. My main point of that section is that you boil down XF as just another nostalgia-baiting F-Zero clone, when it has so much more to it and tons of content to offer. Even call this game early access does it a disservice because, like I said earlier, the game already has enough content to justify its asking price, and it's only going to get more. That was my point with the XF section. Your casual dismissal of such a phenomenal game. I understand if you don't want to cover everything since it is still in early access, although it is cool that you are going to play the game once it fully releases. I can't wait to see your reaction then.
Also, I should have clarified that when I say most of the game takes place in a straight, I don't literally mean a perfectly straight line. Corners that are so shallow you can comfortably take them flat up also count.
No, in fact, it doesn't, and hilariously, the track you're showing is actually one of the hardest to keep a straight turn on if you're trying to go for the O2 pads like the game is intending. And also, Hypertona is literally considered the worst track in the game. I've noticed it's one of the 3 only tracks you actually show when you're trying to talk about XF's straight line problem. So we can't talk about the track where you're racing on an intergalactic space station at top speeds. Can't talk about the track where you're literally driving on a moon facility in the vacuum of space. Can't talk about the desert track where you're racing in a Star Wars inspired sky city with a full day and night cycle as you race. Or how about the track where you're racing on a turbocharged storm station? Or hell, even the track that's just an Easter egg, Mare Falls, being a 3D recreation of Luna Base from Lake's older game, Sparky Electric Jester, new remix and all. My main point is, you could have showed off a lot more tracks than just some of the worst in the game.
It's why you have the iconic fog effect in Silent Hill that defines that series. Limitations breed creativity.
Not always though, sometimes limitations just make things worse. Old runner style racing games as an example. I'll have a section related to this in an upcoming video.
Are you seriously using Outrun as an example of a bad running style racing game? Really? One of the most influential racing games? Because I'll tell you that this game and many others that are inspired by it, such as Slipstream and Horizon Chase Turbo, are extremely popular games, and the limitations in this case led to a widely beloved subgenre of racing games. So yes, while literally not all games benefit from limitations, Outrun certainly is one that did.
Also, taking out the whole physical dimension out of a racing game? Pretty big deal if you ask me. Especially when that dimension is responsible for gravity in a genre known as anti-gravity.
Okay, so I forgot to mention this earlier in my XF section, but the main reason I thought you weren't being honest with the game is because in the earlier builds of the game, yes, there is a bit of a floor hugging issue, but in its newer builds, the cars will straight up just go off the track if you're going too fast in the incline. I mean, look at this.
Oh wow, this big section is long. What?
That just did there? Yeah. It literally sounds like this. No way?
So yes, while I do admit the floor hugger issue can be a problem for most racing games, it's often the opposite that I find far more annoying, with cars just flying off the track with a slight nudge of the wheel.
But I'll be generous and assume you just meant that they're bad as specifically racing games and not just video games in general. I'd still definitely disagree, but we already know that this guy doesn't like kart racers that much.
Yeah, I shit on Mario Kart a lot, alright? But if we ignore that, Nintendo platforms simply don't hold a candle to Sony and Microsoft when it comes to racing games, especially pre-Switch. Compare whatever aspect you want. Popularity, sales, exclusive, number of big releases, Nintendo doesn't come close.
This is true. For the most part, the juggernaut third-party racing games do miss Nintendo consoles, except for Burnout and Need for Speed on the GameCube. but the reason for this is mostly because of a demographic issue. In terms of popularity, however, I mean, let's not kid ourselves here. Let's take the Gran Turismo series and compare it to Mario Kart. It's not even close. Almost double of Gran Turismo's lifetime sales. I'm just saying.
Okay, seriously, dude? AI art?
Better than a Reddit post?
Wait till he finds out which website almost all AI LLMs are trained off of the most.
I agree with most of what he's saying here, but dude really has to explain why he hates kart racers so much, at least specifically Mario Kart, because if you even remotely get into the competitive aspect...
Competitive Mario Kart. Yeah, we can skip the rest of that. Not saying it doesn't require any skill, just too little of it, when compared to basically every non-kart racer. What are you expecting from a game made for children that has item rubber banding burned into its core?
Yeah, man, who wants to talk about that? It's not like it's its whole thriving community of largely popular strats, guides, and YouTubers who have made entire websites talking about these games. Short Cat, he's a nobody. He just plays a children's game for a living. There's no advanced technique, complex item strategy, and track shortcuts that take a lot of skill to pull off. It's just spamming red shells and charging boost. We only care about real racing games around here.
And I know what some of you are going to say, but no. People make competitions out of the dumbest things, and Mario Kart isn't an exception.
People said the same thing about something like Smash Bros. Melee, man. And yet it's still one of the most enduring competitive fighting games ever made, with its community still going strong over 20 years later. Made for kids does not equal lacking in complexity. Heck, even you think Accelerations is an amazing show despite it being made for kids. An opinion which, by the way, I definitely agree with. So tell me, why do you think the same thing couldn't be true for something else?
Big factor as to why AG racers haven't been a surviving genre up until this point. They have yet to feature a big release like all of the other genres of racing games.
That gives us more questions than answers. Why aren't companies considering a major release, I wonder? Narrow appeal is certainly one of them. Well, we don't know much yet, but a new pod racer is in the works. If this doesn't succeed, no AGR ever will, because it got everything behind it. A big IP, great predecessor with untapped potential, and key figures from Need for Speed and... Never mind, it's doomed.
Yeah, I guess I had to agree with him there. Star Wars Galactic Racer was recently revealed at the Game Awards, and by all accounts, it is the next big anti-gravity racing game to be released. If this game doesn't do well, then maybe that will crush any and all hope for F-Zero making a revival. As for the rest of this video, I'm not going to bother going over it, as it's just Sepi making fun of my comment section. While some of them are warranted, I don't really feel like covering all of Sepi's roast, as I'm not 12 years old anymore, sadly. But I'll leave it at that. As I said at the beginning, this will most likely be my final response to Sepi, as I don't want to start any drama nonsense, especially since that video doing so well might have raised a few eyebrows. With all that being said, I hope you enjoyed this rebuttal of sorts to his response. I urge you all, please go watch this video instead of just taking mine for granted. I saw way too many people in my comment section just flat out admitting they didn't watch the original. But yeah, as usual, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.